It's not Wall Street that defines the character of America. It's Main Street. But in 2025, Main Street is being squeezed from every direction. The mom-and-pop diner that's been serving coffee for 30 years can't afford eggs. The family-owned hardware store is still waiting for shipments delayed for months. And local retailers, once the backbone of small-town economies, are now losing customers to rising prices, dwindling foot traffic, and mega online competitors that never close. The crisis is no longer quiet. It's visible, measurable, and for many, irreversible. So the question becomes painfully urgent. Will Main Street make it to the other side of 2025, or is this the year it quietly disappears? In small towns across America, it's not just the quiet that's unsettling, it's the emptiness. On once bustling main streets, the signs are no longer about discounts or happy hours. They read closed, for lease, thanks for 30 years. Whether it's a bakery in Indiana, a bookstore in Vermont, or a dry cleaner in Arizona, something familiar is vanishing, not just businesses, but the daily rhythms of local American life. As of June 2025, data from the US Census Bureau's Small Business Pulse survey shows that roughly 1 in 5 small businesses across the country still report significant supply disruptions. This echoes a broader trend. 35,000 small business closures have been recorded on Yelp since January alone, the majority of them permanent. For context, that's nearly one closure every 10 minutes, and most aren't being replaced. In cities like Cleveland, the downtown vacancy rate for retail storefronts reached 22% by May, a level unseen since the 2000s housing crash. In Des Moines, a local report found that over a third of storefronts in its historic East Village are now empty or operating on reduced hours. And in Fresno, California, a quarter of independent restaurants opened before the pandemic are now gone, most without fanfare, just dark windows and unanswered phones. These aren't just numbers, they represent lives. The cafe run by a father and daughter for 15 years, forced to shutter after egg prices quadrupled. The tailor who could no longer afford fabric after freight charges surged. The bookstore owner who says foot traffic dropped 50% once downtown parking fees rose and inflation ate into families' weekend budgets. Beyond individual hardship, the broader community impact is visible and mounting. When a small grocer closes, it creates a local food desert. When a laundromat shuts down, low-income families lose access to essential services. When a coffee shop disappears, so does an informal hub of community life, a place where students study, seniors socialize, and neighbors connect. The mood among small business owners is a mix of exhaustion and quiet dread. In a national survey conducted in April by the National Federation of Independent Business, 42% of respondents said they were not confident they could remain open by year's end without significant improvement in costs or consumer demand. Many are already dipping into personal savings, skipping paychecks, or deferring tax payments to keep the lights on. Meanwhile, local governments are starting to feel the ripple effect. With fewer active storefronts, cities are collecting less in sales tax and commercial property tax, forcing difficult budget cuts to schools, parks, and transportation. The very fabric of local economies is fraying, not from a single shock, but from a slow bleed no one seems able to stop. This isn't the kind of economic downturn that triggers headlines about recessions or stimulus checks. It's quieter, more fragmented, and arguably more dangerous. Because when Main Street starts to collapse, it doesn't make a crash. It fades, block by block, until one day the heart of a town is just a memory. The slow collapse of Main Street isn't the result of a single force. It's the outcome of converging economic pressures that have built up, brick by brick, over the past few years. The causes are not dramatic in isolation, but together they form a chokehold that many small businesses can no longer withstand. First, the supply chain issues that began during the pandemic haven't fully recovered, at least not for small players. While large retailers have regained access to international suppliers, many small businesses still face longer lead times, inconsistent inventory, and higher base costs. For example, a small hardware store in Kansas may still be waiting on basic parts like fasteners or circuit breakers, products that larger chains can bulk purchase directly from factories. This asymmetry adds cost and delays to every transaction. But it's not just logistics. Tariffs and trade policies introduced or continued under both the Biden and Trump administrations are weighing heavily on import-dependent sectors. In particular, the new 25 to 40% tariffs on goods from China, Vietnam, and other Southeast Asian nations are hitting small retailers, restaurants, and repair shops the hardest. These businesses rely on affordable supplies, from kitchenware and textiles to consumer electronics and packaging. For example, the price of imported ceramic dishware rose by nearly 30% year over year as of April 2025. That might not bankrupt a national chain, but for a local diner, it's the difference between serving or folding. Then comes the consumer side of the equation. Even though the national unemployment rate remains under 5%, wages have not kept pace with the cost of living. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, real disposable income declined by 1.6% in the first quarter of 2025, adjusted for inflation. This means households are pulling back, cutting out restaurant visits, skipping boutique purchases, delaying haircuts and car repairs. For businesses dependent on discretionary spending, that contraction is existential. Add to this the lingering weight of high interest rates. After more than 2 years of elevated rates from the Federal Reserve, most small business loans now come with interest above 8%, with many reporting double-digit rates. For business owners who refinanced during the low-rate era of 2020 or 2021, the repayment squeeze is real. Debt service has replaced growth spending. Many are freezing hiring, delaying equipment upgrades, or choosing not to restock. There's also the silent but devastating effect of consolidation and convenience culture. Platforms like Amazon, Uber Eats, and Walmart Online have captured post-pandemic consumer behavior and reshaped expectations. Americans want one-click shopping, next-day delivery, and 24-hour service. For many small businesses, competing in that environment is futile. They can't match the logistics, the pricing algorithms, or the promotional budgets. And they certainly can't absorb losses to gain market share like a Silicon Valley startup can. Finally, the cost of compliance and operation is increasing across states. From California to Illinois to New York, minimum wage hikes, mandatory health coverage, and zoning restrictions, while well-intentioned, add to overhead costs. A small bakery with 6 employees might now be paying an extra $1,500 to $2,000 per month just to stay compliant. For businesses operating on razor-thin margins, this pushes the model from viable to volatile. This isn't a case of mismanagement or poor business sense. Many of these owners are veterans in their trade. They've weathered recessions, rebuilt after COVID, and adapted to changing markets. What they can't withstand is a system that rewards size, scale, and speed, and punishes those who move at the human pace of local business. In 2025, the American economy is no longer about fairness, it's about survival of the biggest. And for Main Street, that survival is slipping further out of reach with each passing quarter. The impact of Main Street's decline isn't evenly distributed. It's not just about geography, it's about vulnerability. Across the United States, certain communities, industries, and social groups are bearing the brunt of the collapse, with consequences that extend far beyond commerce. Start with rural towns and smaller cities, where Main Street is more than a business hub. It's often the sole economic engine. In places like Bozeman, Montana, or Hattiesburg, Mississippi, the disappearance of a handful of local shops can trigger a full-blown economic spiral. When the independent grocer shuts down, residents must drive 30 miles to the nearest big-box store. When the pharmacy closes, healthcare access is delayed. As foot traffic declines, the knock-on effect hits every remaining shop. What begins as a business problem becomes a community survival issue. Then there's the immigrant-owned business sector, which has long been a pillar of Main Street resilience. In neighborhoods from Queens, New York to South Central Los Angeles, immigrant families run restaurants, salons, bodegas, and mechanic shops, often working long hours, reinvesting in their communities, and hiring locally. But in 2025, these businesses are among the first to close. Many are unbanked or underbanked, making them vulnerable to credit shortages. Language barriers, limited access to state aid, and a lack of digital infrastructure make navigating rising costs and regulations all the more difficult. Once vibrant ethnic enclaves are now dotted with shuttered awnings and empty storefronts. Women-owned small businesses are another group feeling disproportionate pain. According to the National Women's Business Council, women entrepreneurs reported a higher rate of contraction and lower resilience in 2025, especially those in service-heavy sectors like childcare, event planning, and wellness. Many of these businesses operate with fewer employees, less startup capital, and more exposure to unpaid labor or caregiving duties. When inflation squeezes margins and interest rates spike, they're often the first to cut hours and eventually to close. Industry-wise, the hospitality and personal services sector has been hammered the hardest. Independent diners, family restaurants, small motels, barbershops and pet groomers all depend on regular, in-person, discretionary spending. Yet foot traffic is down nearly 30% from pre-pandemic levels in many downtown districts. High food costs, rising rents, and reduced consumer spending have turned once stable businesses into high-risk ventures. The retail sector is no better. Independent clothing stores, bookstores, hobby shops, and vintage stores can no longer compete with the pricing power of national chains or the convenience of online retail. Even long-established institutions are struggling. In early May, a 90-year-old shoe store in Omaha announced its closure, citing a 70% drop in sales over the past 6 months, despite a loyal customer base. It wasn't that people stopped caring. They just stopped buying. There are regional patterns as well. The Midwest and parts of the South are showing the fastest rates of small business contraction, driven by a mix of lower consumer density, higher exposure to manufacturing inputs, and delayed economic recovery post-COVID. While states like Texas and Florida show stronger numbers, those gains are often concentrated in tech or real estate, not in the small, independent businesses that traditionally define Main Street. The ripple effects extend beyond business owners. Workers are affected too. The disappearance of small businesses erodes entry-level job opportunities, reduces informal work flexibility, and contributes to a broader decline in community-based employment. For example, a local cafe closing its doors may eliminate 6 jobs, but also removes a place for high schoolers to get work experience, for single parents to find part-time work, or for older adults to earn supplemental income. Lastly, the psychological toll is growing. In neighborhoods where empty storefronts multiply, residents report declining morale, increased crime perception, and a loss of identity. A vibrant Main Street isn't just good economics, it's symbolic. It tells a community that it's alive, that people belong here, that there's something worth preserving. In 2025, what's being lost is not just income, it's interconnectedness. The businesses affected are not just sellers of goods and services. They are the spaces between the cracks of a modern economy, the glue that keeps American towns from falling apart. Data tells part of the story, but the real weight of this crisis lives in the words and silences of the people who've lived through it. Business owners, workers, and local residents are not just figures in a downward trend. They are witnesses to the slow unraveling of something they helped build, and their voices are now tinged with exhaustion, realism, and in some cases, a reluctant farewell. Maria Alvarez, who ran a small diner in upstate New York for 23 years, closed her doors in April. We used to have a line out the door every Saturday. The regulars would come in with their grandkids. The truckers knew my name, she said. Then the price of eggs tripled. Bacon went through the roof. I tried to raise prices, but people stopped coming. I stopped paying myself last November. I just couldn't hang on. In South Carolina, Reggie and Camille Johnson shut down their barbershop after struggling to afford equipment and state compliance fees. Everything felt stacked against us, Camille said. The cleaning supplies, the chair repairs, even the towels, everything costs more now. But our customers, they're cutting their own hair or spacing out appointments. You can't run a business on goodwill alone. David Tran, a second-generation Vietnamese American who operated a hobby and craft store in Denver, said the final blow came not from his customers, but from the supplier. We used to order miniature kits from Taiwan. Great quality, affordable, he said. But with the new tariffs and shipping delays, I couldn't get anything in stock for the holiday season. People walked in, saw empty shelves, and never came back. Scroll through Reddit's r/small business, and the mood is unmistakable. It's not outrage, it's weariness. A user in Ohio wrote, "I haven't paid myself in 3 months. I'm running on fumes, both financially and emotionally." Another in Arizona shared, "Our community used to have 8 family-run restaurants. We're down to 2, and even those are hanging by a thread." In Fresno, California, a retired couple, the D'Angelicos, who opened a used bookstore as a post-retirement dream, made a heartbreaking decision in May. "We weren't looking to make millions," Mrs. D'Angelico said. "Just a cozy place for people to read, sip coffee, maybe find a forgotten gem. But the rent went up by $400. Our electricity bills spiked. People stopped coming in. Amazon's cheaper. We get it. But it still hurts." Local residents feel the change too. In small towns like Woonsocket, Rhode Island, neighbors talk about how eerily quiet downtown has become. You used to hear music from the record shop, kids getting smoothies, dogs barking outside the pet supply store, said Tom McClure, a retired teacher. Now it's just silence, like the town's heartbeat is fading. There's also a quiet sadness among employees who spent years working at these establishments. Cassie, a barista from Boise, spoke about losing her job after the cafe she worked at for 6 years abruptly closed. "We weren't just co-workers. We were like family. I met my best friend there, I met my girlfriend there, and then one day it was just over. No goodbye party, just a 'we're done' sign taped to the window." Despite the gloom, there are glimmers of resilience. Some shop owners are reinventing themselves online, turning to pop-ups, or forming cooperatives with other struggling businesses. But even those efforts are often born out of desperation, not optimism. "We started selling on Etsy just to survive," said a jewelry maker in Santa Fe. "But the fees, the shipping costs, it's still tough, and we miss the in-person conversations." What emerges from these stories isn't just economic struggle, it's emotional dislocation. Main Street businesses are where people met, celebrated, argued, flirted, found comfort. Their disappearance isn't just about capitalism, it's about culture, it's about memory, and it's about the loneliness that sets in when the places that held our stories disappear. There is no single headline to mark this collapse, no dramatic stock crash, no emergency press conference. The decline of Main Street isn't loud, it's slow, uneven, and deeply personal. It doesn't shake global markets, but it unsettles something more fragile. The identity of communities, the memory of what American towns once were, and the question of what they're becoming. By mid-2025, more small businesses are closing than opening in dozens of US zip codes, a reversal of the post-COVID boom once hailed as a renaissance for local entrepreneurship. Policymakers speak of soft landings and managed inflation, but for thousands of family-owned operations, the landing has already come, and it wasn't soft. Yet the story isn't over. In some places, locals are fighting back, organizing shop local weekends, crowdfunding to save historic cafes, pooling resources for shared storefronts. There's creativity, there's stubbornness, there's even hope. But hope alone doesn't pay rent or erase debt. Without systemic change, these efforts, no matter how well-intentioned, remain sandbags against a rising tide. The deeper question is not just whether Main Street will survive 2025, it's whether America still sees value in it. Because beyond the economics, Main Street represents something hard to quantify: presence, trust, familiarity. It's where people recognize your face, remember your order, and ask how your mom's doing. If that vanishes, what fills the space? Empty storefronts? Algorithm-driven shopping? National chains with interchangeable staff and scripted greetings? Perhaps nothing at all. What's left is a country with fewer gathering places, fewer informal connections, and fewer reasons to stop and linger. That loss is harder to chart, but more corrosive over time. So as we look ahead, not just to the next quarter, but the next decade, we're left with a haunting uncertainty. Will Main Street adapt and endure? Or will we one day explain to future generations that once upon a time, in every town across America, there were places where people built their lives one handshake, one coffee, one haircut at a time? It's a question without a forecast, just a pause, and a fading sign in a dusty window. That's it for today's episode. If you've made it this far, thank you for staying with us, and with the stories that too often go unheard. Main Street isn't just a place. It's a symbol of who we are when we're not watching stock tickers or scrolling through flash sales. It's the barbershop that knows your name, the bookstore that remembers your favorite author, the cafe where someone once told you the truth you needed to hear. And in 2025, it's all hanging in the balance. If you've felt this shift in your own town, if your favorite local spot has gone dark, we want to hear from you. Send us your story. Share your voice, because the story of Main Street is the story of America, and it's still being written. We'll be back next time with more grounded analysis on the economics, policies, and pressures reshaping everyday life across the country. Until then, take care of your community and take a second look at that local shop before it's gone.